Our next installment on process strategy has to do with the topic of capacity and constraint management. Remember that we said that all goods and services come from a process, but then we often want to know what's the capacity of the process because that will have implications for your process design. If you are going to have to serve a large number of customers, then of course you want to make sure that you have a process that's efficient and that has a capacity that could actually meet that demand. So let's just learn a little bit about how we could do some capacity analysis to measure the ability of a process to be able to give us or meet our demand or our expectations. All right. So we're going to just look at capacity, what we mean by that, and then measurement and utilization. So when you're done, you should be able to define capacity, determine design capacity, effective capacity, and the utilization of a capacity. So too little capacity loses customers, and too much capacity is expensive. That makes a whole lot of sense. Imagine if you're producing, again, let's just go to a product focus facility where you're producing bread. You could produce all kinds of bread. Well, if you're producing to the point that at the end of the day, your customer, the retailers cannot sell the volume that you're producing, then that leads to waste. That's expensive, and so having too much capacity can actually, not be advantageous to you. But of course, if you cannot keep up with the demand for the product that you're offering, then that is a problem. All right. So we need to make sure that capacity is just right. And the way in which we do that, of course, is to be able to measure the capacity versus the demand that we're trying to satisfy. And that will help us out. Okay? So in terms of defining what capacity is, it's the throughput or the number of units a facility can hold, receive, store, or produce in a given period of time. It determines fixed costs, determines if demand will be satisfied, and we often think about when we're planning capacity, we could think of three different planning horizons. There's a sort of short-term planning horizon where we are concerned with day-to-day operations. And so we need to schedule workers, we need to schedule jobs, we need to schedule equipment, and we talk about short-range capacity planning in this case. And these are some of the things that we want to do. But then we often think about intermediate range capacity planning, in which case we're thinking 6 months out, right? Or a quarter. We're thinking of for quarter one, quarter two, quarter three, quarter four. So that's kind of more like in the middle there somewhere. We're going to build or use inventory, more improve training, add or reduce personnel. In cases like that, when you're thinking about your sort of a short range, your medium range planning, you think about how much staff do I need? Do I need to increase my capacity temporarily? Do I need to use some subcontracting? Do I need to acquire maybe some additional shifts so that I could temporarily increase the capacity because you could change it? So with medium range planning, you could actually do some capacity adjustments, right, that are not permanent. So at Christmas time, hiring more workers, adding on the next shift because there's just increased demand. But when the demand is low, you could actually remove that shift. You could reduce the number of workers and so on. In the case of not-for-profits, if we're working in humanitarian situations, if the demand is very high, we need more volunteers. If the demand is low, then you have less need for volunteers. And then in terms of your long-range planning horizon now, we're often thinking about the long-term capacity of the facility that we're dealing with. So sometimes we're designing new facilities, we're expanding, putting sort of permanent capacity in the system by building a new section. So we are designing new processes, getting new equipment, acquiring new facilities, or we might be looking to sell them too. So capacity could be both Changes could be both in terms of increasing capacity or reducing your capacity level. All right. In which case, if you're reducing, you're selling equipment, you're closing facilities, and so on. We know that there have been a number of stores that have closed in recent time, retail stores where certain locations are shut down because there's not enough volume or demand to keep them open. And so a company that may have several locations might decide to shut down one or two locations. All right. There's this notion of economies of scale versus diseconomies of scale. Economies of scale, what we mean by that is at a certain point it becomes cost efficient to grow, and beyond that it's no longer cost efficient. So you could see here, if you was this example that's shown to us is about the average cost of a room in a per night in a hotel. And then if you have a 25 room roadside motel, this might be what the cost structure might look like. As you increase it, you get some economies of scale. To a 50 room, you get the best cost performance. And then if you keep on increasing, then your cost per room starts to go up. And so now that's a diseconomy, right? So as you increase from 25 to 50, you get in economies of scale. As you go from 50 to 75, you get in diseconomies of scale. So the idea is that when you're thinking about the capacity or the right capacity for your facility, you got to think about whether or not you should be increasing to get economies of scale. And we have to be able to recognize when you actually have optimized your capacity, because beyond that, your costs are going to start to go back up, in which case you get diseconomies. All right. So let's understand the concept of design capacity versus the what we call the effective capacity of a system. So you might say, hey, I've designed this box. Right? It has a particular design capacity, but because of some aspect of it where maybe I need a cushion at the top for protection and a cushion at the bottom, that now the effective capacity has been reduced by the space that is taken up by this layer versus this layer. So, your design capacity is one thing based on the dimensions of that box, but then your effective capacity is what you could actually utilize. All right? So design capacity is the maximum theoretical output of a system. So if we say that we could process 50 units per hour, and we're operating 8 hours per day, so 5 8s are 40, so our theoretical capacity or our design capacity is 400 units per day. And we could bring that to weeks, months, and so on. However, if it turns out that we cannot actually produce that 50 units per hour, but we have some constraints. Why? Because we might say that when we're processing, if we're just processing without any stops, any changes and so on in terms of tools or preventive maintenance and so on, then we could produce 400 units per day. However, because sometimes we have to stop for equipment changeovers, adjustments, and things like that, maybe your effective capacity is now 40 units per day, right? 40 units per hour, sorry. So in that case, 40 multiplied by 8 is 320 units per day. And so instead of getting 100% utilization, you're actually going to get 40 over 50, which is 80% utilization, or the 320 over 400, which is 0.8 or 80%. And that's utilization. So just keep that in mind. We often want to maximize utilization, but then some cases it's not possible because of the nature of the design of the process. We're going to incur some non-productive time, and that non-productive time means that we are not going to get the full benefit of the theoretical capacity of our system. So definitions: utilization is the percentage of the design capacity that you achieve. So if we, in this case, we're limited to 80%, that's what we're achieving. That's our utilization. All right. And then, so our utilization is the actual output over the design capacity. The efficiency, however, is your actual output over your effective capacity. So your utilization of your total is what you're actually producing versus what you are totally capable of producing if we were in a perfect world. However, your efficiency recognizes the effective capacity. So in the last, just earlier I was talking about, well, because of the shape of the box and so on, or whatever it is, we're limited to, or the process itself, basically downtime, maintenance, we're limited to like 40 units per hour, and then multiply by 8 hours per day, which gave us 320. So that would be our effective capacity. We really can't go beyond that because of the nature of the design of the process and the things that have to be done. If your actual output is 300, and that's your effective capacity, then your efficiency is 300 over 320. But your utilization is 300 over, I think 5 is 400, right? Because we said the design capacity was actually 50 units per hour. So that's your utilization. Your utilization will be lower than your efficiency level unless your design capacity and your effective capacity are the same. In most cases, they're not the same. All right? So efficiency is the actual output over the effective capacity. Utilization is the actual output over the design capacity. So hope you get that. Okay, so we're going to continue. We're going to take a look at a couple of small examples here. So as an example for a bakery, and I actually like to bake bread, so it's an interesting example for us to consider here. Actual production last week, 148,000 rolls. The effective capacity is 175. And I say, well, where did we get that from? Of course, the company would have a sense of if it is going to do preventive maintenance, if there's some changeovers that are happening. And so while we know the speed of the equipment to calculate the total or the maximum capacity, we have to take into consideration the need to do those other things that reduces our ability to really utilize the full capacity. So the effective capacity is 175,000 rolls, and then we have the design capacity of 1,200 rolls per hour. So if the bakery operates 7 days a week, 3 8-hour shifts per day, we could calculate the design capacity, which is the maximum capacity, 7 by 3 by 8. That gives us total number of hours. Multiplied by 1,200 is 201,600 rolls. All right? And then, if our actual production was 148,000 rolls, and our effective capacity is 175, and we know that our design capacity is 201,600, we could then go ahead and calculate our efficiency and our utilization. So utilization is the actual, remember, actual over your maximum, in which case it is the 148,000 over 201,600, which gives us a 73.4% utilization. And you say, well, what should we be targeting? I think anywhere above 70% utilization. 80% utilization is actually quite good, but it all depends on the kind of industry. All right, and then now we want to calculate our efficiency. Well, remember the effective capacity is 175,000, and this is our actual. So the actual over the effective capacity will give us our efficiency. So in this case, 148,000 divided by 175,000 will give us the 84.6% efficiency. All right, so these are relatively straightforward calculations that all of you are supposed to be able to do. So just kind of summarizing what we have here: the actual production, the effective capacity, the design capacity, which can be converted to 201,600, and then we could calculate our utilization, which is actual over design, and the efficiency, which is actual over the effective capacity. Okay. We have a case here where this example, we now introduce a new line that has 75% efficiency. So if it has 75% efficiency, how many rolls are we producing? Remember that our efficiency is our actual over the the effective capacity. The effective capacity. So if that is 75%, 75% times the effective capacity will give us our actual production. Right? Just a matter of manipulating the function. And so in this case, we are looking at 0.75 times 175,000 will tell us what our actual production or expected output is, which in this case is 131,250 rolls. All right, which is what we see here. Excellent. I want you to do this for me, so that gives you a chance to test it. What if we move our efficiency to 82%? Then what is our effective output? Okay, so you could go ahead and calculate that, compare it with your friend that you're studying with. So capacity decisions, capacity and strategy, we need to then recognize the fact of the matter is that capacity decisions can affect all the 10 decision areas of operations management as well as the functional areas of the organization. So if you're thinking about quality, your capacity can have an impact on that. If you're thinking about your supply chain management, then your capacity can impact that. If you're thinking about your project planning, capacity can impact that as well. Your location, all these areas, your queuing, your scheduling, your inventory management, all of these areas can be impacted by capacity decisions. If you think about production capacity will have implications for your inventory management system. So keep that in mind, right? So all of the areas, can be impacted by capacity decisions. So it means that since they can be impacted, that when we're designing our organization and thinking about this mission, we have to think of the role that capacity is going to play in allowing us to achieve that mission. Okay? So considerations for capacity when we're doing our planning is to make sure that you can forecast your demand accurately. Because if you don't forecast your demand accurately, you're going to end up either overproducing or underproducing, in which case you can incur losses. One of the things that I observe quite a bit at supermarkets is what happens to bread. And I tell you, I'm a baker and I pay attention to bread. Is that you notice that by a certain time, I think by about 6 p.m. or 7 p.m., a lot of the bread, there's a whole lot of bread that is unsold and is marked down, right? Because of overproduction. It means that the forecast was not accurate. And so now the bread is marked down. They're trying to salvage the rest of the bread because who wants to buy day-old bread or 2-day-old bread and so on? Although they have some types of bread that sits on the shelf for several days. But if you're into fresh bread, certainly at the end of the day, the company has to salvage that. So if you don't forecast properly, you will start to see a whole lot of bread that's been marked down. And what I've noticed actually are some seniors who are on fixed incomes would actually go shopping around for things like the bread at that point in time where they could get it at a discounted price, right? So understand the technology and capacity increments. So sometimes we may have to, this is our capacity level now, we may need to increase our capacity, and we need to have a sense of what our demand is because you could either increase your capacity ahead of your demand or you could actually wait. So if I did something like this is a case where I have increased my capacity. Then when I get to this point, I'm increasing my capacity again. Then when I get to this point, I'm increasing my capacity. So all here in these little spaces, I actually have excess capacity. If instead we decided that we were going to do something like this, then it may be a case where your demand is actually more than your capacity. You're going to wait for a little bit before you actually decide to increase your capacity. So it all depends on your strategy. Okay, so in this case, you will find that your capacity will always be higher than your demand. And I know that this is not very clear. Let me see if I can make it a little clearer. Maybe just do it over this piece right here. So if you're going to use sort of a stairwise capacity increases, so imagine if this was your demand line, right? So in this case, here you have more capacity than your demand. Your capacity is in excess. But in this case right here, you now have less capacity than your demand. So some companies have a kind of a wait and see attitude where they don't want to always be ahead of their capacity. So here is a shortage. And you're probably not seeing this very well. Shortage. And then here is where you have excess capacity. And the two of them have different cost implications, right? If you're anticipating growth, then you want to say, okay, can we afford to have excess capacity until the growth meets up with our capacity, or do we wait and see? It all depends on how quickly you could actually ramp up capacity, because if you start to get into a shortage and you cannot ramp up capacity very quickly, you may lose customers. So it's very important that you have an approach that allows you to balance your capacity and demand, right? So you need to find your optimum operating size, and you need to build for change, which is what I was just discussing. So managing demand, one of the things that you can do, so if you have demand exceeds capacity in that case, what can you do to bring about a matching of your capacity and your demand? You could curtail your demand by raising prices, scheduling longer lead times, and so on. Or you could have a long-term solution to increase the capacity. If your capacity exceeds your demand, then you could try to stimulate market demand through advertising and so on. You could do some product changes, or in some cases, if your capacity is flexible, you could actually use the excess capacity to produce something else. All right. Adjusting to seasonal demands, produce products with complementary demand patterns. So snowmobiles in the winter, and well, actually we have to reverse them because you need the snowmobiles in time for winter. So maybe in the fall you're producing snowmobiles, and then in the spring you're producing lawnmowers. If your factory could produce both of these items, all right. So when you have complementarity, you actually help to stabilize your organization. In terms of other tactics for matching capacity to demand, which is actually a very important function in operations management, you could make some staffing changes. You could adjust your equipment, the speed and capacity of your equipment. You could purchase additional machinery if you need to increase your capacity. You could also sell or lease existing equipment. You could also do outsourcing, which is a very popular thing to do. You could improve your processes to increase your throughput. You could redesign your products to facilitate better efficiency and better throughput. You could adjust your process flexibility to meet changing product preferences. You could close facilities. And then I mentioned as well, you could do some outsourcing. Demand and capacity management in the service sector, that is something that we have to deal with. When you think about movie theaters not having sort of like high demands all throughout the week, some of these movie theaters might introduce a cheap night, and then to actually see an increasing capacity at that time. So for pricing, you could actually influence demand. So you can make appointments, reservations, first come, first serve in terms of your capacity management. Use full-time staff, temporary staff, part-time staff, and you could use a combination of all of those to make things happen appropriately. Bottleneck analysis and the theory of constraints. One of the things that we try to do to improve process performance is to identify bottlenecks and remove them. And when you remove a bottleneck, there will be another bottleneck that will emerge. So the process is actually constant until you reach a desired level of performance. So each area can have its own unique capacity. That's the first thing to remember. And if those areas impact each other, then one of them will be a constraint on the rest of your system. Capacity analysis determines the throughput capacity of workstations in a system. So you need to be able to determine what's the capability of each step in your process, and then identifying where the bottleneck is and removing that bottleneck. So a bottleneck is a limiting factor or a constraint, and then it has the lowest effective capacity in a system. It is what that will determine the performance of your system. So if you have a 3-step process, A, B, and C, if this takes 2 minutes, 5 minutes, and 3 minutes, well, guess who determines how fast your system works? So in this case, it would be B, would be your limiting factor, your limiting step. And so you could only produce an item every 5 minutes. If you keep, the flow of raw materials into your system, a product will emerge every 5 minutes. So in 60 minutes, you could produce 12 units per hour. That's the limiting capacity. But here could produce 20, and here could produce 30 per hour. But this could only produce 12. Right? And so it will be your limiting workstation. If you want to improve productivity, you're going to have to get rid of that bottleneck. But if we brought this down now to 1.5, well, guess where the bottleneck is now? The bottleneck is now over here. It has shifted over to C. And now you go from, however, you have improved from 12 per hour to 20 per hour. So every 3 minutes, you could produce a product from this workstation. That's essentially what bottleneck analysis allows us to do, to understand the capability of our process. So let's understand the process time of a station is the time to produce a unit in a single workstation. Remember, that's what I just mentioned that to you here. So for example, 3 minutes and workstation C will give us 20 units per hour. The process time of the system is the longest time of the longest process in the system, right? So the process time of a system is the longest time. In this case, when I had the 2, 5, and 3 minutes, then 5 minutes was the process time of a system. That is what will determine that's where the bottleneck is, and determine how fast you could produce product. And then your cycle time is the total throughput time, the time it takes to get through your system. So in our case right here, I had 2 and 5, 7, 7 and 3, 10. So 10 was the cycle time. All right. So you see, but how come if the cycle time is 10 minutes, how come we can get a product coming out every 5 minutes? Yes, that's because if you're feeding the production line constantly, right? So it's taking 2 minutes here, 5 minutes here, 3 minutes, and it's out. 2 minutes. Well, as soon as, remember, once that 2 minutes is finished, all right, then another piece of raw material is put into workstation A, right? And then now it's being processed. So out of that 2 minutes, what would happen is that the item that's now at workstation B has started, and then 2 minutes later, you will have another item from workstation A showing up, but it won't be ready yet. B won't be ready yet because there's still 3 more minutes of processing time to go, and so therefore we start to develop work in process inventory, where you will start to build up some items there, and then after the 5 minutes. The next one goes over to C, then it takes 3 minutes and then it's out. So after the 5 minutes is up, another item would start on workstation B. So in other words, the rhythm of B will be that if you're constantly feeding it, is that it's going to produce, it's going to process a product every 5 minutes. So what will happen is that eventually you will see, when the process is stable, every 5 minutes a product will be coming off that production line. It doesn't mean that the part that just came out only took 5 minutes. No, it's coming out every 5 minutes, but it actually spent 10 minutes in the system, all right, which is the throughput time or the processing cycle time. So let's look at some examples here. 3 station work assembly, 2 minutes, 4 minutes, and 3 minutes. So if I were to ask you what's the bottleneck, answer that question for yourself. Okay, you should be telling me this is our bottleneck right here. So how often will a product come out of this workstation? Then you should tell me every 4 minutes it should come out of that workstation. So if you want to know how many units per hour you could produce, 4 into 60 is 15 units per hour. Is what your capability is there from this process. All right. What's the total cycle time? You give me the answer. 2 and 4, 6, and 3, 9 minutes is your cycle time. All right. So hopefully you understand that. Now, if you say we want to improve the throughput time or improve the productivity, you could then try to reduce B from 4 minutes to, I don't know, anything lower than that. 3 minutes would definitely be an improvement. 2 minutes would definitely be an improvement. 1.5 minutes would be an improvement, etc. All right. So the system process time is the process time of the bottleneck after dividing by the number of parallel operations. What does that mean? So if I have 2 bottleneck activities, let's call it A, B. Sorry, let's call it B and C. B and C, A, D. Let's say this is 5, this is 20, 20, and this is 8. right? So when we look at this, we say, oh, 20. So B is a bottleneck operation, C is a bottleneck operation, 20. But because there are two of them in parallel, that means that technically speaking, we're getting 2 units processed every 20 minutes, which the equivalent of that is 1 unit processed every 10 minutes, all right? So when you say the system process time is the process time of the bottleneck after dividing by the number of parallel workstations. So we have 2 of them, 20 divided by 2 gives us 10, and so this system would produce a product every 10 minutes, all right? In which case 6 per hour in this case. System capacity is the inverse of the process time. So I did 1 over 10 multiplied by 60 gives me 6 per hour. And then the process cycle time is the total time for the longest path, So even though we're getting 2 of them processed same time at B and C, the reality is that a product going through one of the lines right here is taking 5 and 20, 25 and 8, 33. So the process cycle time is still 33 minutes. However, every 10 minutes we will get a product coming out of that system. All right? Let's take a look at a couple of those quickly. So we have, again, my favorite example, bread, 30 seconds per sandwich, 15. So we see 2 parallel lines right here with the same times, the bread, the fill, the toaster, bread, fill, toaster. And then if we look at, we have, these are bottleneck activities right here, but there are 2 of them. So in effect, you're getting 1 for every 20 seconds or 2 in every 40 seconds. All right? So if you take that 20 seconds, that's the sort of bottleneck over here, you see, where is the bottleneck in this entire system? Is it here at the order? Is it here at the wrapping? Or is it in this sort of bread filling and toaster, this section, the assembly line section? Well, because if we look at this right here, we're getting 2 every 15 seconds, we're getting 2 every 20 seconds, and 2 every 40 seconds. Then 20 seconds become the limit of that sub-facility right there, that assembly line. But that 20 seconds is actually smaller than the 37.5. So really the wrapping and delivery section is your bottleneck. All right? So it means that every 37.5 seconds is when you're going to get a sandwich. That's when you're going to get a sandwich. And however, the throughput time is the longest time through. So we would actually need to go through here, up here, here, here. If we add up all of that, it's 30 plus 15 plus 20. That's 50 plus 15 is 65, and 40, 105, 105 plus 37 is 142.5 seconds is what it's going to take to get any sandwich through that system, which is about 2 minutes and change. So we could do capacity analysis. We could see that the workstation has the longest processing time of 40 seconds. The toast workstation, 2 lines each deliver a sandwich every 40 seconds, so it means 20 seconds per toasting per that section in terms of the toasting part. At 37.5, wrapping and delivery has the longest processing time and is therefore the bottleneck. Capacity per hour is we would now have to, if we want to determine the capacity of the entire system, since 37 seconds is the bottleneck, then we would have to take an hour, 60 minutes times 60 seconds, and then divided by 37.5. I just realized something here. I'm wondering if, oh no, I didn't make that mistake. I thought I actually talked about, yes, 20 seconds per, at the toaster is 20 seconds. And then if we divide that by 60, then that's 3. That's 3 per minute. And then 3 by 60 minutes, 1 hour would be 180 per hour. Okay, so and I thought I had confused seconds with minutes with hours in that example. I didn't. Okay, so we now have, this is, we can make 96 sandwiches per hour. Process cycle time is 142 seconds, 0.5 seconds, which I already mentioned. And this is just sort of showing you the same kind of analysis. All right, here's another one. We're going through a standard process for cleaning teeth, and cleaning and examining x-rays can happen simultaneously. So if we look here, we check in 2 minutes, 2 minutes to take your x-ray, 4 minutes to develop the x-ray, and then we have 24 minutes for the hygienist to do the cleaning while the x-ray examination is taking place by the dentist at the same time. Then you see the dentist and then you check out. So if you're analyzing this system, you'd say, ooh, where is the bottleneck? Well, clearly the bottleneck is at the hygienist. 24 minutes per person or per unit. All right. These are not parallel operations. They're happening at the same time, but they're not identical operations. Not like you have 2 hygienists working 24 minutes per person, and then saying that we actually have an effective time of 12 per person because we're getting 2 people being processed at the same time. It's not the same thing because it's a completely different process. X-ray exam and hygienist cleaning. All right. So the 24 minutes per unit is going to be your bottleneck. Your throughput for that system is the longest path. So 2 plus 2 is 4. Plus 4 is 8. 8 and 24 is 32. 40 and 46. It should be 46 minutes is the longest path. So if we go through this, we'll see all the possible paths must be compared. The cleaning path is 46. The x-ray exam path is 27. The longest path involves the hygienist cleaning the teeth. That bottleneck is at the hygienist, 24 minutes. And then you could see that the hourly capacity is 2.5 patients per hour. All right. And then the patient should be completed in 46 minutes. That's the longest time that it takes through there. All right. So to summarize, capacity calculations and capacity planning is essential for profitable operations, but let's just not just say profit only, but also for efficient operations. All right. Because if we didn't for not-for-profits, we're not focusing just only on the financial benefit. It requires accurate forecasting so you could right size your process to make sure that you have the capacity to meet your demand, understanding the equipment processes and capacity increments, finding the optimum operating size, ensuring that you have flexibility, and then being able to do bottleneck and break-even analysis can be very helpful in determining what is the ideal capacity that you need to have. All right. So we just focus a bit on capacity analysis, recognizing that if we don't know the capacity of our processes, it's difficult for us to make promises around service time. We don't know how long it's going to take to serve a customer. And so if we want to improve customer service by reducing the time it takes to actually get a service delivered, we need to be able to do the analysis, find the bottlenecks, find ways to remove the bottlenecks from redesigning the process using new technology, using the analytics from the data analysis that we do to find opportunities to redesign that process. So if we do all of that, we could improve process performance, and by improving process performance, you could actually better impact the mission of the organization that we're trying to serve.